Welcome back to our journey through literature. Last time, we delved into the escalating darkness of Macbeth Act 2, witnessing the horrifying murder of King Duncan, the immediate chaotic aftermath that saw, the natural order completely upended, and of course, Macbeth's ascent to the throne. All fueled by raw ambition and Lady Macbeth's chilling resolve. We saw Malcolm and Donalbain wisely flee Scotland, sparking immediate suspicion and inadvertently setting the stage for even deeper, more complex consequences. Now we turn our attention to Act 3, a section of the play that many scholars and readers consider the true psychological and dramatic climax of the entire tragedy. It's really where the initial crime truly begins to exact its devastating toll.
That's precisely right. If Act 2 is about the audacious, terrible leap into tyranny, Act 3 is where the cost of that leap truly begins to manifest itself, not just on the kingdom, but on the very souls of our protagonists. It's a fascinating and frankly absolutely brutal turning point where Macbeth, now king, is confronted with the crushing weight of his actions. He attempts desperately to secure his ill-gotten power, only to find himself trapped in this horrifying, inescapable spiral of paranoia and further bloodshed. What's truly captivating here is how Shakespeare brilliantly escalates both the internal and external conflicts. He shows us not just what happens, more murders, more deceit, but why these events matter so profoundly, and how they unravel the very fabric of the protagonists' minds, leading them really to a point of no return. It's where Macbeth fully transforms from that wavering, conscience-stricken hero we saw in Act 1 and part of Act 2 into a truly determined and isolated tyrant.
That makes perfect sense. We're really moving from the initial shocking crime to the desperate, increasingly violent attempts to cover it up and secure the ill-gotten gains. As you said, that sounds like a catastrophic recipe for disaster, almost guaranteed to fall apart. So let's begin our exploration of Act 3, starting with Scene 1. This is where the seeds of paranoia are well and truly sown, and Macbeth initiates new, even more ruthless plots entirely on his own accord.
Right. We open this scene with Banquo, a character who has consistently represented a moral compass and keen observation throughout the play. He delivers a soliloquy, a moment where he speaks his innermost thoughts directly to the audience, to us. He's reflecting on Macbeth's incredibly swift and unexpected ascent to power, how he's gained King Cawdor Glamis all, just as the Weird Sisters promised. And right away, Banquo expresses his profound suspicion. He tells us, "And I fear thou playedst most foully for it." This immediate statement of suspicion, even though it's internal, establishes his keen intellect and his unwavering moral integrity. He's not naive. He sees right through Macbeth's facade.
So he's basically stating what the audience already knows to be true, making him a very astute observer. But what I find so interesting is that despite this acute suspicion of Macbeth, Banquo still clings to the witch's prophecy for his own descendants. He acknowledges that his lineage is destined to produce kings, pondering, "May they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope." Does this suggest he's perhaps a little tempted, or is it just him holding on to a different kind of hope?
That's a crucial distinction, and it speaks volumes about his character. While he entertains the possibility of his own prophetic destiny, unlike Macbeth, he has absolutely no thought of acting to bring it about. His hope is passive, patient, almost a quiet expectation of what fate might naturally unfold. This very quality of patience and moral restraint positions him as a perfect foil to Macbeth's impulsive, murderous ambition.
Right.
It's a classic example of dramatic irony, where we, the audience, know something crucial that Banquo doesn't, that his suspicions are deadly accurate, and that his very existence, let alone his potential lineage, puts a huge target on his back. His moral integrity, paradoxically, makes him incredibly vulnerable in a world now twisted by Macbeth's reign.
That's heartbreaking, really. So then Macbeth enters, now fully established as king, but we quickly see his newfound power is anything but secure. The security he craved from the crown has just evaporated. What we see here is a truly significant and chilling shift in his character, isn't it? He's a very different man from the one we met in Act 1.
He absolutely is. From the moment he takes the stage as king, Macbeth is visibly consumed by fear, a gnawing paranoia that overshadows any joy he might have felt from his ill-gotten crown. He's heard the witch's prophecy that Banquo's descendants, not his own, will be kings, and this becomes an intolerable existential threat to his barren scepter, as he calls it.
That phrase, barren scepter.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful because it encapsulates his profound insecurity. He has seized the throne, but he has no heir, no natural successor to legitimize his rule. His crown is literally fruitless, and that's a constant, terrifying reminder that his reign is illegitimate and temporary, according to the prophecies.
And it drives him to an even darker place, doesn't it? He's no longer hesitating or being pushed. He's now desperate to control fate, to secure his illegitimate reign by any means necessary.
Precisely. His solution is horrifyingly decisive. He takes matters into his own hands and independently hires 2 murderers. This is a critical development because unlike the murder of Duncan, where Lady Macbeth provided the initial push and the detailed plan, Macbeth is now acting alone, proactively, driven by his own deepening fears and paranoia.
It's a profound evolution.
Absolutely. He's gone from a man tormented by conscience, as we saw after Duncan's death, to a ruthless, calculating, and cold-blooded tyrant. He doesn't need external prodding anymore. The evil is now, self-generating.
And he doesn't just hire them. He manipulates them with a truly cynical and deceptive cunning. He convinces these desperate men that Banquo is the source of all their misfortunes, painting him as their oppressive enemy. He tells them Banquo has held you so under fortune, implying Banquo is the reason for their poverty. That's a chilling degeneration, moving into a realm of pure Machiavellian tyranny where he's twisting truth and exploiting others' grievances to serve his own murderous ends.
It's a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He's not just paying them. He's weaponizing their resentment, twisting their perception of reality. This entire scene is a critical pivot, marking a significant escalation in the play's tension and trajectory. It explicitly establishes the new central conflict. Macbeth's desperate, violent attempt to control fate and secure his power by eliminating Banquo and, crucially, Fleance.
Right, Fleance too.
Yes. This action initiates the direct chain of events that will culminate dramatically in the banquet scene later in the act. The man who once hesitated is now a fully formed, ruthless, calculating mind. His internal struggle with guilt, which tormented him so vividly after Duncan's murder, is now completely overshadowed by this consuming paranoia about Banquo's royalty of nature and the perceived threat of Fleance's lineage.
And what's truly terrifying is the isolation this descent brings him. The fact that he excludes Lady Macbeth from this new independent plot is hugely significant, isn't it? It means he no longer needs her push, her spirits that tend on mortal thoughts to unsex him. He's now truly isolated in his evil, a one-man reign of terror.
It really emphasizes his increasing isolation and evil, showing that he no longer needs her promptings, but is driven by his own deepening fears and an insatiable need for security that will never come. As he chillingly says to himself and to us, to be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus.
Such a powerful line.
It encapsulates the core of his profound insecurity. Being king, holding the crown, it's meaningless to him without absolute security, without the guarantee of a lasting legacy. And that insecurity, that perpetual fear of losing what he has gained, drives him to ever more desperate and bloody acts, initiating what you could call a murderous spree. The irony, of course, is that each murder only deepens his insecurity, trapping him in this vicious cycle.
So we're witnessing ambition evolve from simply seizing the crown through a single heinous act to a desperate, fear-driven need to maintain it through perpetual violence. And in doing so, Macbeth is actively trying to thwart the witch's prophecy about Banquo's lineage. The scene vividly underscores the central theme of fate versus free will, showing Macbeth's continued and even more aggressive use of his free will to commit evil acts. But this time it's a direct attempt to force a particular future, one of his own design, rather than letting fate unfold naturally. It's almost like a desperate battle.
And this inability to find peace is glaringly evident. He's not just reacting to threats, he's preemptively eliminating them. This reveals a mind that is constantly tortured by the insecurity of his position, by the knowledge that his reign is built on a lie. It foreshadows even further mental deterioration. The consequences of guilt are not just internal torment, but a terrifying perpetuation of violence, creating more ghosts than he could ever possibly bury.
Those consequences, indeed. They become even more palpable as we move into Act 3, Scene 2. Here we find Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in a private conversation, but it's a stark contrast to their earlier scenes of plotting and mutual encouragement. Lady Macbeth actually opens the scene with a soliloquy, and it's a striking departure from her earlier fierceness, isn't it? She reveals profound disillusionment and despair, a feeling of utter emptiness despite achieving their ultimate desire. She says, "Naught's had, all spent, where our desire is got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy." That's a truly bleak assessment of their situation.
It's an absolute pivotal moment for Lady Macbeth, a moment of stark, raw honesty. Her previous mantra, her pragmatic dismissal of guilt with "what's done is done," has clearly transformed into this devastating realization that what is done cannot be undone. This soliloquy reveals a burgeoning sense of remorse and the crushing weight of her conscience. This is the distinct beginning of her decline, isn't it? A
Absolutely.
stark contrast to Macbeth's escalating villainy, and it very clearly signals her eventual psychological breakdown later in the play. While she attempts to comfort Macbeth later in the scene, trying to maintain her formidable composure, her own distress or profound sense of unfulfillment is now palpable. She's hiding her suffering from him, perhaps not wanting to burden him further, but the audience, we see the first cracks in her iron will.
And Macbeth's state isn't much better, if not worse. He's clearly racked by terrible dreams and constant fear. The image he uses is incredibly vivid and almost physically painful to hear. Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. That powerful, visceral metaphor truly conveys the extreme mental anguish and internal agitation he's experiencing. Imagine living with that constant torment.
Oh, it's horrific.
The scorpions symbolize his tormenting thoughts, his crippling paranoia, and the crushing weight of his guilt constantly stinging him. He even finds himself envying Duncan's peaceful sleep, recognizing that the king is, after life's fitful fever, he sleeps well. It's a dark, bitter irony that he now wishes for the peace of the dead man he murdered, highlighting just how far he's fallen from any semblance of contentment.
It powerfully highlights the central theme of guilt and its relentless consequences, doesn't it? Both of them are suffering profoundly, albeit in different ways. Sleep, which is so often a symbol of innocence, peace, and renewal in literature, is denied to them. Duncan, in his grave, is beyond treason, nor steel, nor poison, malice, domestic, foreign levy. Nothing can touch him further. They have gained the physical crown, the ultimate object of their ambition, but in doing so, they have irrevocably lost their peace of mind, their innocence, and any hope of true rest. This scene makes it abundantly clear that the crown is not a source of satisfaction, but a crown of thorns perpetually tormenting their minds.
And then Macbeth reveals a deed of dreadful note without explicitly telling her he plans to kill Banquo and Fleance. He tells her, "Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed." This marks a truly critical shift in their relationship, a stark reversal of their earlier dynamic where she was the instigator.
Yeah, a huge shift.
He is now undeniably the dominant force in evil. He's no longer seeking her validation or her push. He's initiating these new horrors. And it feels like it's not out of love or to spare her, but because, as you literary analysts often suggest, he does not need her now to egg him on. He wants to prove himself capable of independent villainy, and in doing so, he isolates himself even further.
Exactly. He's asserting his horrifying independence in villainy, and his invoking of darkness here is also incredibly telling, reflecting his internal state. He says, "Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand, cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale." This personification of night reveals his desperate desire for darkness to conceal his new murderous acts, reflecting his deteriorating psychological state. The great bond he refers to can be interpreted in several ways. It's certainly Banquo's life, but it could also be the natural moral order that holds society together, or even the bond of his own conscience that still faintly makes him pale. It profoundly emphasizes the theme of appearance versus reality, as they must maintain a facade of bright and jovial hosts for their banquet, while their inner lives are filled with scorpions and dark, bloody plans. The contrast couldn't be starker.
The irony is chilling. He desperately wants to appear bright and jovial, a stable king, but his mind is a hive of scorpions, and he's invoking the darkest forces of night. This scene truly distinguishes him as a tyrant, not a legitimate king. His reign is characterized by constant fear and the desperate need for more violence, a stark contrast to Duncan's benevolent and peaceful rule.
And that's precisely where the theme of kingship versus tyranny really comes into sharp focus. Macbeth's rule is founded on murder, and it can only be maintained through further violence. It demonstrates that such a path leads to perpetual insecurity, not stability. The imagery of "we have scorched the snake, not killed it," vividly illustrates their precarious position.
Right, that line.
It indicates that Duncan's murder has not brought an end to their troubles. New, more dangerous threats constantly emerge, forcing them into a self-perpetuating cycle of escalating crime. They're constantly fighting phantoms, and with each act of violence, they create more. It's a tragic vision of how one wrong turn can trap you on a road of endless self-destructive choices.
The plot thickens, or perhaps the blood spills even more rapidly as we move into Act 3, Scene 3. This scene is incredibly quick, brutal, and profoundly significant in its immediate aftermath. What unfolds here?
Here, Macbeth's meticulous, though utterly paranoid, planning comes to fruition. 3 murderers, including that third one Macbeth sent likely to ensure the job got done, given his deep distrust ambush. Banquo and his young son, Fleance, in a dark wood near the palace. The ambush is violent and swift. Banquo is killed, a direct result of Macbeth's fear and his obsessive desire to secure his barren scepter. But, critically, in a moment of desperate heroism from Banquo, Fleance manages to escape.
And that escape, in its brevity and unexpectedness, is everything, isn't it? It's not just a plot point. It's a catastrophic failure for Macbeth, one that unravels his entire murderous scheme despite how carefully he planned it.
It absolutely is. This scene functions as the dramatic climax of Banquo's narrative arc. His story ends here, but his legacy and the witch's prophecy live on. More importantly, it's a crucial turning point for the entire play. While Banquo's death fulfills one part of Macbeth's immediate objective, eliminating the direct threat he perceives, Fleance's survival directly preserves the witch's prophecy about Banquo's lineage. This single event ensures Macbeth's ultimate downfall, setting the stage for his eventual defeat. It dramatically raises the stakes because it introduces an element completely beyond Macbeth's control, despite his increasingly desperate efforts to manipulate fate through violence. It's a powerful illustration that some things, some destinies, cannot be altered by human will, however tyrannical.
So we see Banquo's true character shining through, even in his final dying moments. His last selfless act is to protect his son, urging him to flee the immediate danger. Fly, good Fleance, fly, fly, fly. Those urgent, desperate, repeated words really underscore his immediate priority: the survival of his son, and, by extension, the continuation of the prophecy. It's a moment full of genuine pathos, a heartbreaking tenderness, and it signifies a shift of hope from Banquo to Fleance, the future. It reinforces Banquo as a loyal, brave, and loving father, providing a final, poignant contrast to Macbeth's self-serving cruelty. It's a final act of integrity that stands in stark opposition to Macbeth's accelerating depravity.
And Fleance, though he has a relatively brief appearance in the play, becomes profoundly significant because of this escape. His survival, almost by chance in the dark woods, makes him a potent symbol of the future and the enduring threat to Macbeth's illegitimate rule. His escape directly prevents Macbeth from fully controlling his fate, from truly locking down his tyrannical reign. This moment vividly highlights the ongoing tension between fate and free will. Macbeth exerts his free will to murder and dominate, but fate, through Fleance's survival, seems to laugh in his face, reminding him of his limitations.
And it speaks volumes about Macbeth's crippling paranoia that he sends a third murderer to ensure the job gets done. Yet, ironically, all his meticulous planning, his utter lack of trust even in his hired agents, still results in a catastrophic failure because Fleance escapes. It's almost as if fate or some greater unseen force is actively working against him, or at least beyond his control, despite his best, most violent efforts.
That's a key takeaway from this scene. Despite Macbeth's active, violent intervention to literally extinguish a lineage, Fleance's escape directly challenges Macbeth's attempt to alter destiny. It powerfully suggests that some aspects of fate are beyond human control, even for a determined and bloody tyrant. The imagery of Fleance as the worm that's fled hath nature that in time will venom breed, no teeth for the present, perfectly captures this ongoing, yet not immediate, threat.
Ah, the worm.
Yes, the worm here is small, seemingly harmless for now, but he carries the potential for future destruction, for venom. So, while an innocent character like Banquo is murdered, the escape of Fleance ensures that a future reckoning remains possible, preventing total victory for evil. It ties into the larger theme of justice, suggesting that a natural order will eventually, perhaps inevitably, reassert itself. Evil, it seems, can never truly win a total victory in Shakespeare's universe.
And all of this tension, this spiraling guilt and paranoia, leads us to what is arguably the play's most iconic, and certainly its most psychologically charged, scene in Act 3, the Royal Banquet, which quickly becomes anything but celebratory. What completely unravels here for Macbeth?
This scene is, without a doubt, the play's dramatic and psychological climax. Macbeth, attempting to project an image of stability and normalcy as king, is hosting a lavish royal banquet for his nobles. But his internal world is in utter turmoil. He receives news of Banquo's death, which momentarily brings a sense of grim satisfaction. But this is immediately shattered by the news of Fleance's escape. That failure is the final straw, sending him reeling. Then, Banquo's ghost appears at the table, visible only to Macbeth.
Only to Macbeth.
Yes, causing him to behave wildly, speaking directly to the apparition, and implicitly confessing his guilt in front of his entire court.
It's a public meltdown, a terrifying display of a fractured mind. And Lady Macbeth, to her credit, tries desperately to cover for him, making excuses for his bizarre behavior, telling the nobles that "my lord is often thus." But despite her quick thinking and composure, the feast is utterly ruined, and the guests depart in utter disarray, filled with confusion and growing suspicion.
It's the ultimate public unraveling of his sanity. Macbeth's hallucinations of Banquo's ghost, "Thou canst not say I did it, never shake thy gory locks at me," are crystal clear manifestations of his overwhelming guilt and paranoia. This vividly illustrates the consequence of regicide and the disruption of natural order, proving that Macbeth does murder sleep. He shouts, "Blood hath been shed ere now, but now they rise again and push us from our stools." This line reveals his terror. He thought killing Duncan would end his troubles, but instead it unleashed a cycle of violence that now haunts him, literally. He completely loses his composure, exposing his madness to his entire court, which is a truly significant turning point for the kingdom's perception of him. His attempts to regain courage by challenging the ghost, "What man dare, I dare, take any shape but that," are desperate and failing. He tries to assert his masculinity, but his actions are those of a deeply terrified and unraveling mind.
And the ghost itself is such a powerful, visceral symbol, isn't it? It's not just a figment of his imagination, but as some critics describe, a vision that trembles and flickers in the light of other worlds. It's a constant, terrifying reminder of the inescapable consequences of his actions. It's truly Macbeth does murder sleep come to life, denying him any peace, any rest. It's the embodiment of his tormented conscience.
Exactly. The ghost is the physical manifestation of his internal agony, a symbol of the crime that won't stay buried. And Lady Macbeth's reaction to this public breakdown is equally telling and heartbreaking in its own way. She exhibits immense self-control and quick thinking. "Sit, worthy friends, my lord is often thus." She tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for as long as possible, but her efforts are ultimately futile against the sheer force of Macbeth's unraveling. She even tries to unman him with sharp rebukes, calling his visions impostors to true fear, echoing her earlier manipulation of his masculinity. But her influence over him is clearly waning. Her words have no effect on his internal torment. After the guests have left, her exhausted remark to Macbeth, "You lack the season of all nature's sleep," reveals the immense strain she is under. This isn't a rebuke, it's a statement of profound exhaustion, marking the visible beginning of her own psychological breakdown. It's where scholars often point out that her nature begins to sink after the murder, with her earlier fainting and Duncan's discovery being the first intimation of the change. Here, it's undeniable.
So while Macbeth is spiraling into a very public madness, Lady Macbeth is sinking under the unbearable weight of their shared guilt, despite her formidable outward strength. This scene truly hammers home the theme of guilt and its devastating consequences for both of them, though they manifest in different ways.
It certainly does. This scene also powerfully explores the theme of appearance versus reality. The celebratory banquet, which should be a symbol of social order and normality, dissolves into most admired disorder, shattering the public image of a stable monarchy. Macbeth's visible madness exposes the disguising of their hearts and intentions. His behavior clearly marks him as an unfit ruler, driven by fear and paranoia rather than a just king, further distinguishing him as a tyrant. The suffering of the country is now evident even in the royal hall, as their king descends into a visible, terrifying madness. This public display of his instability leads to widespread suspicion among the nobles, laying the groundwork for outright rebellion and firmly placing the play into the falling action, the point where the consequences of the climax begin to play out.
And by the end of this scene, Macbeth is completely unhinged. He resolves to seek out the witches again, which is a truly desperate move, isn't it? Signifying his total reliance on malevolent, supernatural forces and his utter commitment to a path of destruction, convinced that more violence is the only answer. He also notes Macduff's pointed absence from the feast, setting up a crucial future conflict that will come to define the rest of the play.
His realization of endless violence is palpable, and it's a terrifying moment of self-awareness, even amidst his madness. He says, "Blood has been shed ere now. The time has been that when the brains were out, the man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again, with 20 mortal murders on their crowns and push us from our stools."
Chilling realization.
It acknowledges the horrifying futility of his crimes. They bring no peace, only more torment and a self-perpetuating cycle of violence. This highlights the unnaturalness of his reign, both in his tortured mind and in the disturbed kingdom. It's as if he's realizing that once you commit one murder to gain power, you open a Pandora's box of endless, necessary violence, a terrifying treadmill he can never step off.
From the psychological torment of the banquet, we transition to a scene that many scholars actually debate the authenticity of, some believing it might have been added later. However, regardless of its origin, Act 3, Scene 5 undeniably sets a very clear and ominous direction for the supernatural elements. Here, we're introduced to Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. What happens in this scene, and what's its clear structural role in the narrative?
In this scene, Hecate, a more powerful and authoritative figure than the three witches we've previously met, confronts them directly. She's furious that they've been dealing with Macbeth, a wayward son, as she calls him, without her involvement. She views Macbeth as merely a pawn, someone who has no real interest in their art, but is motivated purely by his own selfish, spiteful, and wrathful desires. She then instructs them to meet Macbeth the next morning and plans to provide him with false, misleading prophecies. Her explicit, malevolent goal is to give him a false sense of security, to instill an overconfidence that will lead directly to his downfall. She wants to ensure his destruction by subtly guiding him to his own demise.
So this scene basically lays out the witch's deeper game plan, explicitly confirming that they're not just passive predictors of fate, but active, malevolent manipulators of Macbeth's destiny. They're not just observing, they're orchestrating.
It's exactly. Although its authenticity has been debated for centuries, this scene is structurally significant because it explicitly outlines the witch's future strategy. It emphasizes that Macbeth is not just succumbing to his own ambition, but is being actively manipulated towards his destruction by external evil forces. It positions Macbeth as a pawn in a larger, supernatural game, accelerating the plot toward his inevitable tragic end. It's an explicit planting of ideas for his demise, telling us, the audience, what's to come, which dramatically ratchets up the dramatic irony. We know he's being set up for a fall, even as he confidently steps into it.
So Hecate is presented as this powerful, controlling, and deeply malevolent figure among the witches. She embodies the darkest forces at play, showing the audience that there's an even higher level of evil at work, beyond just the three weird sisters.
Her presence, her authority, and her clear directives confirm the witch's true destructive intent toward Macbeth. Her role clarifies that their prophecies are not just revelations of fate, but powerful tools of manipulation designed to entice Macbeth further into evil, to make him dig his own grave through hubris. The true active nature of their evil is laid bare here. They're not just tempting him, they're actively guiding him towards ruin.
And her directive really sets the stage for Act 4, providing a very clear roadmap for the audience. She says, "I'm for the air. This night I'll spend unto a dismal and a fatal end, and that distilled by magic sleights shall raise such artificial sprites as by the strength of their illusion shall draw him on to his confusion. He shall spurn fate, scorn death, and bear his hopes above wisdom, grace, and fear, and you all know, security is mortal's chiefest enemy." That last line, security is mortal's chiefest enemy, is incredibly chilling, isn't it? It's almost a warning to the audience about the dangers of overconfidence.
It truly is. This speech explicitly explains the purpose of the witch's future prophecies: to instill an extreme, unjustified overconfidence in Macbeth and drive him to spurn fate by acting recklessly, believing himself invulnerable. The imagery of the vaporous drop profound and artificial sprites emphasizes the deceptive, illusory nature of their magic. It's not raw power they're giving him, but illusions that will lead him astray. And the final lines, "Security is mortal's chiefest enemy," serve as a powerful, universal warning and a key thematic statement about hubris. It highlights the theme of fate versus free will, but with a terrifying twist. The witches intend to manipulate Macbeth's perceptions, making him believe he is invulnerable. This raises fascinating questions for us as the audience. How much of Macbeth's downfall is his own choice, his own moral failing, and how much is orchestrated by external evil? Yet even with that manipulation, the scene still stresses that his own hubris, his overconfidence in his invulnerability, is his chiefest enemy. It perfectly reinforces Banquo's earlier prescient warning about the instruments of darkness not being entirely truthful, how they win us with honest trifles to betrays in deepest consequence.
Now, after that unsettling glimpse into the witch's manipulative plans, we shift focus to Act 3, Scene 6, which shines a spotlight on the growing political unrest and open suspicion in Scotland. This scene serves a crucial expository function, right? It tells us what the kingdom is thinking.
It absolutely does. This scene is firmly situated in the falling action, showing the direct consequences and accelerating movement towards Macbeth's downfall. We hear Lennox and another lord engaging in a seemingly innocent conversation on the surface, but it's actually filled with layers of deep irony and barely concealed suspicion regarding the recent murders, Duncan's, Banquo's, and even the convenient deaths of the guards.
Right, the sarcasm.
Yes, they use heavy, biting sarcasm, like Lennox's pointed comment. How it did grieve Macbeth, did he not straight, in pious rage the two delinquents tear that were the slaves of drink and thralls of sleep? This isn't a genuine question, it's a rhetorical jab, clearly showing the nobility's deep suspicion of Macbeth's official flimsy story and his increasingly tyrannical rule. It explicitly confirms that Macbeth's facade has crumbled for the discerning few in his court.
So, the truth about Macbeth's tyranny is becoming widely known and discussed among the Scottish nobility, and they're voicing that collective suspicion and dissent, even if it's veiled. This scene is truly about the gathering storm clouds, isn't it? The whispers are becoming open accusations.
Absolutely. The conversation then reveals a critical piece of information. Macduff has bravely fled to England to seek Malcolm's aid from the English king. This isn't just a casual detail. It's a direct declaration of war, albeit a diplomatic one for now. It explicitly sets the stage for direct, organized rebellion.
Huge development.
Massive. It's no longer just private suspicions or fearful whispers. Open opposition is actively forming, taking concrete steps towards a counter-movement. The scene serves as crucial exposition, informing the audience of the growing unrest and the active formation of a powerful counterforce against Macbeth. It unequivocally signals that the kingdom's deep suffering under Macbeth will soon lead to armed conflict, solidifying the audience's understanding of Macbeth as an illegitimate and destructive tyrant.
And it definitively establishes Macduff and Malcolm as the primary agents of justice, doesn't it? Macduff's refusal to attend Macbeth's feast, a blatant act of defiance, and then his flight, marks him as the single most direct and immediate threat to Macbeth's reign. The Lord's reference to Macduff as some holy angel fly to the court of England and unfold his message ere he come, that a swift blessing may soon return to this our suffering country under a hand accursed, really elevates the coming conflict. It frames it as a righteous crusade.
It's a powerful, hopeful plea, imbued with a sense of divine purpose. It personifies Macduff as almost a divine messenger, someone carrying the weight of Scotland's suffering. This line beautifully conveys the profound misery of Scotland under Macbeth's accursed hand and the desperate longing for justice and a return to rightful natural order. It effectively aligns Macduff's cause with divine will, positioning the coming conflict as a truly righteous one, a fight for the restoration of natural order, of kingship over tyranny. It's a moment of light and hope in the increasing darkness.
So we're seeing a very clear development of the themes of kingship versus tyranny here. Macbeth is no longer just subtly being presented as a bad ruler. He's explicitly identified as a tyrant, ruling through fear and violence. The contrast with Duncan's benevolent, nurturing rule is sharpened immensely, highlighting the devastating impact of illegitimate, murderous power on an entire nation. The health of the king is now undeniably linked to the health of the kingdom itself.
And indeed, the widespread suspicion and open discussion of Macbeth's tyranny confirm that Scotland is deeply disturbed and actively awaiting the restoration of natural order. The theme of order versus disorder is front and center. The scene explicitly sets in motion the forces of justice and retribution against Macbeth, showing that the growing opposition of the forces of good against Macbeth's rule is now actively planning a military response. The groundwork for the final bloody confrontation is laid, and the audience leaves this act knowing that the scales of justice are finally, if slowly, beginning to tip.
So what does this all mean for our overall understanding of Macbeth? Act 3 is undeniably the play's dramatic and psychological climax. Here, Macbeth's kingship moves from an imagined glory, a mere aspiration, to a terrifying, inescapable reality. We see him transform into a paranoid, isolated tyrant, driven by fear to commit increasingly heinous acts, entirely independent of Lady Macbeth's initial promptings. His chilling decision to murder Banquo and Fleance, followed by his utterly public breakdown at the banquet, haunted by Banquo's ghost, marks the irreversible point of no return. Lady Macbeth, too, for all her formidable composure, shows the first deep cracks, suffering the very real internal torment of their shared guilt.
Exactly. What's truly fascinating here is how Shakespeare masterfully demonstrates that the pursuit of power through evil leads not to peace, not to security, but to perpetual insecurity and profound mental anguish. Macbeth literally murders sleep and peace of mind. Fleance's unexpected escape, a small detail with monumental consequences, and the rising tide of organized opposition from figures like Macduff, explicitly seeking support in England, show that even Macbeth's desperate attempts to control fate are ultimately doomed to fail. The unnatural events we first saw in the Omens are now not just supernatural signs, but the lived, tangible reality of a suffering country, under a ruler who has, in his own words, scourged the snake, not killed it. The play profoundly explores the incalculability of evil, how in meddling with it human beings do they know not what, leading to reactions that are never what they expect. The consequences always exceed their control.
By the end of this act, Macbeth is no longer just a tragic hero who made one terrible choice. He is a fully developed villain, isolated in his madness, surrounded by his own terrifying creations, and the kingdom is openly mobilizing against him. His internal world has shattered, and the external world is now reflecting that exact chaos, demanding justice. The stage is perfectly set for a brutal confrontation, a final reckoning.
This raises a truly important question for us. Now that Macbeth has fully embraced his tyrannical nature and the forces of retribution are unequivocally gathering, how will his overconfidence, ironically fueled by the witch's deceptive new prophecies, clash with the growing rebellion? And what final horrors and desperate acts will unfold as Scotland fights to reclaim its natural order and shake off the dead butcher and his fiend-like queen in Act 4 and beyond?
Thank you for joining us on this literary journey. If you're nodding along, help other curious minds discover these conversations too. Press like and subscribe.